Right, just coming up to the corner here doing my binding. I'm using about 1 centimetre seam allowance. What I've done here is I've marked on the fabric where the edge of the quilt is, the end of the quilt even, and then I've marked about 1 centimetre up from that because that's where I'm going to stop. And stop and completely finish off. And cut my threads. Okay, I'm going to turn this and just flip the whole thing around. So what I'm going to do here is make sure that my fabric goes right into that corner, the binding fabric, and then fold it, and then start folding it along the next edge. So we've got a little corner here. I'm just going to temporarily put a pin in here, just really to hold my place, to see how far down that binding comes. And then this bit here, I'm just going to move all this out of the way so I don't accidentally stitch into it. So I'm just going to lay it back under the machine, make sure that, stay all straight, make sure that this is all still lining up. And then I'm going to start stitching just below where that original stitch line is, so I can kind of see that through my fabric. So I'm not going to mark it. If you need to mark it though, if you've got a dark binding fabric, then by all means, whoops, mark it with a pin, something like that. Right, I think that's just below. You don't really want to stitch into that corner, certainly don't want to stitch into the binding fabric that's gone into that corner. Right, so just here we go, etc, etc. Right, so I've made my 4th corner. Only done a few stitches down here really, just to get the corner in, because you do want to leave a good chunky opening so you can get your binding together. Okay, so what we've got here is 2 flappy bits of binding. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to fold one bit, actually maybe slightly further in because it's a bit close to the stitching, and then I'm going to bring the other one over, but leave a little gap, like 1 millimetre or so, depending on how stretchy your fabric is. If you're using like a linen, you might want to leave even more of a gap, because when you've attached the binding together and then you're going to stitch this edge here, it will stretch a little, and if you butt these two up together right now, then they won't fit very nicely. Later they'll actually be slightly too big. So what I'm going to do here, a bit of threading going on. So I've got my pin coming out of one fold, going into the next fold, coming out of that fold. There's various ways of doing it. You can mark it with a fabric marker, obviously on the wrong side of your fabric. But I think I've got the measure of this. So what I'm going to do now, because obviously I don't really want to stitch with my pin sitting lengthways like this. This is basically my stitch line. So what I'm actually going to do is put some pins in widthways, because now that this long pin has told me where the bits need to join together, I can't actually really see the fold line here, so I'm just going to mark it. There we go. Okay, so now I'm going to stitch that shut. So if you leave only a really little gap here, it's quite a bit of manoeuvring, because this quilt sort of will pull on your binding, so that's why I do leave quite a bit of a gap. Right, do make sure your 2 bits of binding lie flat on top of each other, and then just stitch them together as normal. So now I can cut the excess seam allowance off. On the binding, you don't need a very big seam allowance at all, because it will never be pulled at again. All right, and then we're just going to fold this down again. Look at that, nice and neat. And then just attach that last bit of binding. It's a bit difficult to get this under because of my walking foot. Okay, so And then this seam allowance here, just fold it open as you come up to it. No need to iron or anything. Don't need to back stitch either if you're just going to overlap your stitching here. That will do. Okay, so now that's the binding on first run. One sec. So now we're going to fold the binding to the right side, the correct side that is. Here we are. So again, I'm not going to start in the corners. Corners are the most complicated bits. So I think I might have cut this a bit wide. If you fold your raw edge to the, let's pull this up a little bit actually so you can see properly. You fold your raw edge of your binding fabric to the edge of your quilt and then pull it across. You should at least cover this stitch line here. If your binding is too narrow and you can see that stitch line, you've gone ever so slightly wonky. I'm going to pull mine in a little bit more because I've ended up with slightly chunky binding. Okay, and then just put a pin, or you can use little quilting clips or sewing clips. Okay, so just going to do that all the way along. Now I'm going to keep that fold, the same depth of fold into that corner. I'm not going to do the corner just yet. I'm going to go across into the next edge and fold that in and down. And now you can do the corner. You see the corner is almost already in there. So I'm just going to fold this down and then fold this one across, and with any luck you'll have a perfect mitered corner. If not, use a long pin and you can stick the pin in that bit there and pull it taut. There you go. So that's your mitered corner done. And just carry on doing the edges. So really the thing to remember is when you come up to a corner, you put a pin there, then you put a pin there, and then you fold your corner in. So don't try and do the corner before you've done that one, because it just anchors it in and it falls into place quite nicely.